può una migliore leadership contribuire a risolvere le sfide del Nord? E cosa significa una migliore leadership nell'Artico? Di cosa parliamo quando parliamo di leadership nell'Artico? Esiste un prototipo di leadership artica. La leadership viene eseguita a tutti i livelli, dal livello internazionale a ciò che accade sul posto di lavoro. Durante questa sezione ci sposteremo avanti e indietro tra i diversi livelli. Vedremo qualche connessione tra governance e leadership a livello macro e a livello micro. Quindi, buongiorno e benvenuti a tutti ad Arctic Connection 2022, giorno 2. My name is Bård Borch Michaelsen. I work as an associate professor at the Arctic University of Norway and Nord University. And I'm very happy to say that we have a great panel today to answer the questions which I tried to raise in Italian in the beginning. From the left, Tonje Margrethe Vinsnes Johansen, Ida Kristine Jacobsen, Carmine Robustelli, and Bjørn Olsen. This panel is divided into 3 parts. We start with the big picture, then move to the perspectives of indigenous peoples, and finally come to a kind of micro perspective, and then perhaps we will move back again. You will, here at Palazzetto Venezia and online, lots of people are online, will be invited to ask questions to the panelists after each of the 3 parts. So be ready. But we start with the big picture, the North seen from the South. How may better leadership and governance contribute to solve the challenges of the High North? And what is better leadership in the Arctic? Carmine Robustelli has worked as a diplomat since 1988. He served at the Italian embassies in Brasilia and Buenos Aires, as well as the Italian permanent representation to the European Union in Brussels. In the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, he served in Kerala as head of the visa department and director for migration. And he was ambassador to Cuba from 2012 till 2016. Carmine Robustelli is now special envoy for the Arctic. The floor is yours, Carmine Robustelli.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure really to be here for the fourth year for me, for the 4th edition of this event of Arctic Connections. And I have to start really with my thanks to the COI, to the Norwegian Embassy and Nord University for continuing organizing this event. As a special envoy for the Arctic, as coordinator of the Arctic Table in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, COI really gives a great contribution to complete really the general picture of our engagement in the Arctic. And doing that, organizing this event is also a way to show leadership, to enter in our in the subject of our conversation, leading by example, giving the example of doing things really about the Arctic in a non-Arctic country. You know? In the last months, we are experiencing an increased interest towards the Arctic all over the world and in Italy, with more articles, seminars, political declarations, but compared with some years ago, when I started 5 years ago to deal with this subject. As you heard from my curriculum, I worked before in completely other area in the sectors of international relation. When I started, the focus was on climate change, on environment, more than on other issues. Now the focus, unfortunately, we have to say, changed. We see more events exactly because of the deterioration of the general framework of international security, involving also the Arctic. Being the first speaker of this session in the morning, I thought that it was better to have some colors on the screen, not only me. So I prepared a PowerPoint presentation, maybe that we can start, that can help me also to follow a line, and you also to follow also the conversation. And even the students of the master in international sustainable development and Arctic studies of COI of this year and of last year, maybe will recognize some slides that I used for their lesson, translated in English for the others, maybe especially for Norwegian friends. In the slides, you will find obvious things maybe for you, but maybe for the audience it's useful to go, and I think it's always a good thing, to the fundamentals, to speak exactly about the leadership. To speak about the leadership really, and governance, because leadership is linked to governance, of course. I think it's important to have a clear idea of which are the actors, what they can do, each one really what they can do. Maybe I think that this one to go on. No, yes. Yes. So first of all, the states. You have the Arctic states and the non-Arctic states, of course. So the first point to remember, if we talk about the leadership, is the fact that we have the 8 Arctic states, and we have to respect the sovereignty of the 8 Arctic states. And of course, in international relations, they are the first actor, the first leaders, the first that have also the responsibility to find solution and to propose solution for the Arctic. But we have also, and this is an important characteristic of the Arctic, especially if you compare with the Antarctic, as this in some way natural to think for many people not dealing with this subject usually, is that in the Arctic you have people, of course. You have 4 million of people. We have a lot of representatives of these people here, and also indigenous people. And it's very interesting the fact that in the dynamics of the international relations in the Arctic, also compared with other parts of the world, with the Arctic Council, there is a very original way to involve these people in the dynamics of international relations, also in showing in some way leadership. And this was for me a great lesson that I had from dealing with the Arctic, especially with the Arctic Council, something we don't have to forget, and we have to take also in these difficult times. No, this was, yes, that's fine. Go back. There is a time, a delay that. The international legal framework, and this slide about the international legal framework gives you the idea, no? A general idea, going random, of the fact that we have different level of governance, so different level of actors of showing leadership, because you have a typical situation from the Arctic states, but you have also great global challenges where you have other actors coming in. And you have the Arctic Council as original, as I said, regional framework for cooperation. I go really quick because I have to reach the point. And this slide is only to remember really that we have also another level that's very important in the Arctic. It's the level of science. Many of the decisions about the Arctic have to be science-based. So you have, of course, the states. You have the people there, also indigenous people, but you have another level. These are scientists, and they show a great leadership in the Arctic and within the Arctic Council, producing knowledge. in some way. And when you produce knowledge, when you produce assessments that are really very well based, very well funded, you can really have a de facto leadership also that you can play. And companies, as everywhere in the world, because of course it's easy to speak about international relations only referring to states, to the formal subjects of international relations, but companies are really very strong. We have the next panel about energy. We have Italian also companies in the Arctic, and the fact to involve companies in a network of decision makers in the Arctic and everywhere. I think it's very important to really manage to balance all the interests, and all the to face all the challenges we have in front of us. Why I'm talking about the Arctic Council a lot? Because I think, and it was really for me a great pleasure to discover it when I started to work with the Arctic. The Arctic Council was really something in some way new in international relation, and contributed to make the Arctic an example of peaceful cooperation, an area of low tensions and dialogue, even in presence of growing disagreements between Arctic states in Arctic areas. Also through the Arctic Council, I think that the strong reasons for a circumpolar cooperation prevailed in the middle of new factors of confrontation, partly generated in the region, but mainly imported from other scenarios. But the terrible situation deriving from the Russian invasion of Ukraine overwhelmed the Arctic exceptionalism, as some say. Neither the strength of the Arctic cooperation could resist the war, of course. It's almost obvious, I think. We have to take stock of the situation, but we have also politically to stress the persisting reasons for a close cooperation in the Arctic and maintain open the channels of conversation, especially between like-minded states, like we are doing here at an academic level, but also at political level. It's important to do it, to create the conditions for a quick recovery or a wider dialogue as soon as the general framework allows it. We are here exactly for that. You know that one of the most costly consequences in the Arctic of these dramatic circumstances has been the pause in the works of the Arctic Council. And but I think that the model of full involvement, as I said, of the 6 organizations of digital people, active role of the observers, really the role of the scientists in the thematic groups are an original and creative way to face these challenges, and something that we need to preserve. And just to recap it, to stop here, and then maybe later we can talk about Italy. Remember that the fact that we are together, states, scientists in the working group, permanent participants with indigenous people, observers, all together with different positions within the Arctic Council, but it's something that I consider important that we have to try to preserve in some way for the future relations in the Arctic. And maybe let me just remember 2 other important, I think, things that the Arctic Council also created, a sort of spin-off of the Arctic Economic Council, because of course it's important, the relation with economy, and UArctic. UArctic was mentioned also yesterday, to involve the academia in this great picture. And to go back to CIEO, it's a great pleasure for me that CIEO is the first and unique member for the time being, Italian member of UArctic. This happened at the beginning of my work with the Arctic, it's something that I consider really important, as I said, to complete the picture of our engagement in the Arctic. Then I have something about Italy, but maybe I leave it for another moment of this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmina. I think this is the moment.
Yeah.
This is a moment. What is the Italian perspective on governance in the Arctic?
Go back to the presentation.
Back to the PowerPoint. Thank you.
Well, so let's start. No, in any case, Italy is maybe I don't need I did it so many times that maybe I don't need the presentation, but it's really important for me to say that Italy is history, science, companies, and academia and divulgation. These are the main points of our engagement in the Arctic. An engagement that, if you give a look to this slide, doesn't start really in 2011. It is only a reference of the last moments, really. Really has a history in the Arctic. That's really important because we're more than 1 century of presence in the Arctic with the explorers and a continuous presence in the Arctic. It became really important for the time being in 1997, when we opened the station in Svalbard, because of course research is the main point of our presence in the Arctic. But as you can see from this slide, in the last 10 years, our engagement in the Arctic grew a lot. With the status of observers, with a strategy that we are going to update in the next months. We're trying to prepare a paper, of course, that decision is political. And with the political interest going, and also a new program for science and for scientific research in the Arctic that we started in 2018. The principles, what are the principles? That's very important because we have respect of the sovereignty rights of the Arctic states, promote local and indigenous values, cultures, tradition, cooperation, bilateral, multilateral, because we believe a lot in international cooperation in the Arctic as in the other parts of the world, sustainable development with the involvement of the private sector and the companies, if not, these are only words, of course. And scientific research is the main point, above all within international framework and international programs. And well, all the main subjects, you know, of research are covered of our program. Also, we try to give an eye to the social consequences of the climate change in the Arctic. These are the first result. I want to say about these slides only a word more about the fact that we recently, Ca' Foscari University in Venice started a PhD in polar sciences, and that's a step forward. Of course, we have the usual calls for research projects and all that, but this is another point that it's really very important to raise awareness about the Arctic and in general the polar regions in Italy. Yesterday you heard about ships going to the Arctic from the Navy, from the president of our National Research Council. So there's a strong presence. This Laura Bassi went last year for his first campaign. This is a new polar research ship that had last year the first campaign in the Arctic. When they say in the Arctic, it's closely linked to Norway because it's mostly in Norwegian waters. And I noticed the campaign of the Navy since 2017. That's a usual also presence in the Arctic. So it's more, if I can say, for me, it's more. Our main point is always scientific research, of course. And if you have scientific research and companies, you put them together, you have you need a political framework. And we try to give a political framework, but we think that especially in this moment when we have a difficult situation in the Arctic from a point of view of security that we did of course within NATO, as you heard yesterday, but we cannot remember that we have the main element of our engagement in the Arctic, this scientific research and fight to climate change and the environmental challenges in general.
Grazie, Carmine. One question. You've been working in Buenos Aires, Havana, Brasilia. Seen from Rome, what are the differences between governance in that part of the world and the Arctic? What are the biggest differences?
Well, you say, it's so different. So far, well, there's also differences between Cuba and South America, of course, and they are really far. But in any case, with the Arctic, there are big differences in any case. And also my perspective was different because there I worked a lot with bilateral relations. And here, my work is closely linked to regional dynamics and international relations.
In the Arctic.
In the Arctic. So my point of view also is different, So it's very difficult to compare, to say that it's difficult to find something similar and then the differences. What I can say, and I want to say about that, is the fact that I've found in the Arctic a need and a will of towards international cooperation.
A will to cooperate.
To cooperate and to have a general framework, international cooperation will to open also the Arctic to other countries in the right way, of course, with the right paths, ways, and this can be useful for Latin America, but for all the world. It's a pattern of international relation that can be used also in other areas. That's interesting for me.
Yeah, so you think that the way we cooperate in the High North should be an example for other parts of the world?
Yes, the way that I said to involve in the cooperation, not only states and not only Arctic states, also peoples, indigenous people, also scientists. This model, if I can say, can be useful also for other parts of the world, for other critical areas also from an environmental point of view.
Yes. A last question, Carmine. Let's say that Italy moved to be a country between Norway and Sweden. How would the governance have been different than now? What would you have done?
That's really difficult to say. I think, first of all, that we share a common set of values in Europe. So I think that I don't see a great change if we become an Arctic state, because really, well, there are cultural differences, there are different way of life, there are many differences, but the common points, the common values are really the prevailing element. So I think that we share many things, and these elements are the most important point that we have to underline. So I don't see so many differences. Maybe we have a great experience, historical experience to work in the middle of a sea in some way, the Mediterranean, So we are used to deal with different cultures of Mediterranean that are maybe more different than in the Arctic in some way. So this, if we have this ability of mediation, of cultural mediation in the Mediterranean, maybe can help in the Arctic, even if we don't move to the Arctic physically.
So what to say is that Italy has great experience in handling cultural differences.
Yes,
yeah.
Maybe.
Grazie.
We should have with our history.
Björn Olsen, what have you been hearing from Carmine?
Well, thank you for a very interesting and educational presentation. What I hear a little bit is that the new normal is more change. And that, I think, require not only adaptation, but also transformation, because like you say, you have a situation now where you have 8 Arctic states, but with Russia out of the equation, there is question marks around the Arctic Council and the future of Arctic Council. And also that you have leadership on different levels in the Arctic, from the Arctic Council to companies to the Arctic, the science community, local society, and people. And also that is important that they are involved in discussions for the future, which indicates that you should have even more dialogue and more real dialogue at all levels. So we together could find a better future. Yes.
Will you comment that?
Oh, yeah, I agree completely, of course, and I think that, I repeat, exactly in this moment, when we see only yesterday, during the session of yesterday, there was a question about, well, we cannot forget the environmental problems and climate change in this moment only because there is security. And it seems to be, in Italy, we say that men do one thing at a time, and women can do more things at the same time. I don't know if you say the same in Norway. Yes. Well, in international relations, we are obliged to think as women. We have to do all these things at the same time. We have to deal with security, environment, with everything. It's not I know that we can have priorities, but we have, in any case, to do everything. So especially in this moment, we cannot forget that we have great challenges. This doesn't mean that we don't have to deal with something that's more urgent. We have to do everything, you know, in this way. And I think that we can, and especially you in the Arctic, you can do it for the Arctic and to go on with the positive experience of cooperation in the Arctic in these difficult moments.
Thanks. Any questions online or from the audience? See, Marco, come here. Marco is one of the students actually at the master course in Arctic issues, studying at CIE. Use the microphone. What is your question, Marco?
My question for Italian Special Envoy Carmine Robustelli. What role could play the Italy in these power games? Because NATO watches Russia and China, especially, as a threat. And so my curiosity is about Italy could play only economical and scientific role, or also could be play also a political role in the Arctic. Thank you so much.
Well, I think we do play a political role in the Arctic, but of course we cannot become an Arctic state, of course. So there is a level of involvement, of course. We are completely involved through NATO or on security. We are part of an alliance, and we play our role within the alliance in a balanced vision of the threats. Because also there is maybe a common question is, well, now that is going east or north, it is not going to look at south. No, of course, there is a common interest to have a balanced approach. Within this balanced approach, of course, we work within NATO also for the eye north. And in the other sector, politically, of course, we are observers, and as you have seen, the idea of the observers in the Arctic Council is the political, the observers are active observers in the Arctic Council, and we have bilateral relations with all the Arctic states. The fact that Russia and China, I always listen talking about Russia and China together on the same level when we talk about the Arctic. You know? Also, from an educational point of view, let's separate, because Russia is an Arctic state. Maybe it's the Arctic state geographically, you know, in some way. So there is a great difference between the two different roles of China and Russia in the Arctic, independently of the war of this current situation. We have a relation with Russia also. We had, but we hope to have again also related to the Arctic. So we play our role in the Arctic. China is an Arctic state, but it's a big country. If I think in other occasions I said, well, if we are in a seminar about Sahel or about South America, we talk about China. That's clear. No, that's clear. China is a big country. It's maybe the second power or the first in some way, or the second. You can choose the ranking. And of course, they are present everywhere, not only in the Arctic. They have interest everywhere, and we have to learn to deal also with the new actors, because this is the reality of the world. Italy has its role, its presence, its size also, and within these the alliances that we have, in connection with like-minded countries, we play our role in all the aspects: political, scientific, and economic. And of course, we believe in international cooperation. So our main point is always to improve the level of international cooperation on common rules for the Arctic and for other parts of the world. And many of the challenges of the Arctic can be dealt only in more global fora, in more global, frameworks. And also through these frameworks, we play a role, a political role for the Arctic and related to the Arctic.
Thank you. So do we believe in international cooperation in the Arctic. Do we have one more question? Yes, Gabriele? Gabriele, he's also a student from the master course. Please ask the question, your short question, to the microphone.
Good morning. One of China's reaction for Nancy Pelosi visit to Taiwan was to cut the cooperation with the US in climate change issues. In your opinion, could it be possible that China or Russia stop the cooperation with Western countries in climate change issues?
Well, I'm not. Thank you very much. Very interesting question. But in any case, there are other colleagues dealing specifically, of course, with climate change and international cooperation in climate change. It's not me. But in any case, I can say that we have, I think next month there will be the COP27, and we will see it, concretely. I don't believe that that there is an interest of China and Russia to stop cooperation on climate change, because of course climate change is not something that is of specific interest of Western countries. It's a global challenge, so it's also in their interest to continue to work on that. So, in my opinion, the will to cooperate and the need, more than the will, need to cooperate on this global challenge and on climate change is so strong that, well, we will see what will be the result of the COP26. These results are always lower than we expect or that we want, but they are an improvement compared with the past. So I think that this path, this process is going to continue also with the involvement over Russia and China. Of course, I don't like the forecasts in international relations. We can analyze the situation now. We can analyze all the elements that we have. But it's very difficult to see what will be the future because there are new elements coming in. What I can say that there is a need of cooperation, and they are so interested as we are to cooperate.
Thanks. We will still stay on the macro level, but perhaps a little more meso. The question is, what kind of leadership is required in global climate and nature crisis? And what lessons may be learned from Arctic indigenous peoples? We will have introduction by Tonje Margrethe Vinsnes Johansen. She is advisor in the Arctic and Environment Unit at the Sami Council. Tonje is Master of Political Science and is especially concerned about climate, sustainability, and socio-economic issues. The Sami Council is a voluntary non-governmental organization of the Sami peoples made up of 9 Sami member organizations from Finland, Norway, Russia, and Sweden, founded already in 1956. Tonje, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting the Sami Council to speak at this event. I have a cheat sheet here. So the Sami people are recognized as indigenous peoples with our traditional homelands in Europe. The Sami homeland, Sápmi, has remained quite intact, where large areas have been managed in a sustainable and holistic manner. Recently, many other economic interests have looked to explore and extract these areas for minerals and green energy solutions, causing further land destructions. IPBES, the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the Convention on Biodiversity, and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change have at various occasions recognized indigenous peoples' stewardship role in protecting the nature and addressing climate change and loss of nature and biodiversity. So, the indigenous peoples safeguard a majority percentage of the world's remaining biodiversity, the lands, territories, and resources of which indigenous peoples traditionally own, manage, use, or occupy represent at least a quarter of the global land area and also significant marine areas. While biodiversity is declining globally, it is declining less rapidly in the lands and areas managed by us, indigenous peoples. Recognizing the knowledge and values of indigenous peoples enhances conservation, restoration, and sustainable management of nature. This includes indigenous peoples in the Arctic. The Sami people do not only harvest from nature for today's needs, we do so for the future generations in mind. In his master thesis, Bivdit Luossa, To Ask for Salmon, Sami scholar Aslak Holmberg, which is also our newly elected president, writes about the young salmon fisherman Aslat. Aslat has learned from the elderly that Kuolli galgabistit suddasis suddasi. The salmon you catch should last from the time the river freezes until it opens again. If you have salmon left, which you caught last summer when a new fishing season begins, then fishing luck will not stand with you. Then you either have taken too much fish or you have shared too little. To fish for salmon is in northern Sami, Bivdit Luossa. But the word Bivdit can also mean to ask for salmon. A key lesson in Sami culture is that you should not ask for more than you need. We must shift the focus of green transitioning being about obtaining cheap energy, even more unsustainable consumption, and instead find ways to keep materials in circulation and contribute to lower and smarter consumption. As citizens, we the Sami people of several of the world's most wealthiest countries, I think that the Nordic countries should be in the forefront of finding new and better solutions. Even though economic gain may not be possible at this stage, taking land areas in order to halt the climate change will only make the climate change even more brutal. These states have the money, the capacity, and the technology to search for new and better solutions. And the indigenous society holds the knowledge about our nature and ecosystems. Together, we can find a new way. Not including indigenous peoples and respecting and value indigenous knowledge from the beginning of any process, either political or in business matters, is not only damaging for us, it's also costly and highly risky for investors and governments. Let me give you a clear example of what I mean. Last week, it was exactly 1 year ago since the Norwegian Supreme Court concluded that Fosen wind energy project violates the rights of the Sami reindeer herders of Fosen-Njarke in Norway. 151 wind turbines, roads, and power lines have destroyed winter pastures and migration routes crucial for maintaining sustainable reindeer husbandry in the area. And the reindeer herders are still waiting for action. The Norwegian government still does not know what to do with this ruling, because taking down the wind turbines and restore the nature will be a huge cost for both the state and the investors in this energy project, to say it lightly. But leaving them there also means that the Norwegian government is allowing and is a part of the continued violation for our indigenous and human rights. Our knowledge holders have been warning the authorities and Western researchers for decades about how wind turbines in the middle of grazing land and calf land cannot coexist with reindeer herding, and we have not been believed. This is a devastating example of what happens when Sami right holders and Sami knowledge is not heard from the beginning in decisions affecting our traditional land and nature. Quick economic gain by taking our land areas is not the way forward. It should be in everyone's interest to find better ways and mechanisms for this not to happen again. The decline in the world's remaining nature areas and biodiversity is a serious threat to all of us. And this is happening now faster than ever. The destruction of ecosystems undermines the nature's ability to regulate greenhouse gas emissions, and it protects against extreme weather. Thus, by taking down more land, it accelerates climate change and increases our vulnerability to it. The global community needs to change how it manages nature. The indigenous peoples around the globe holds the key to this, and the Sami people is already taking leadership in climate and biodiversity negotiations in the UN system. We encourage states and other stakeholders to follow suit and work together with us to find better ways for a better future. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Tonje. You were telling a story about this guy and what was happening. And that kind of knowledge, which you were telling about, is, so to say, silent knowledge. It's not taught at universities. But it's important. And what should we do? What should you do? What should I do to incorporate this kind of knowledge within ordinary teaching and leadership?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think that in the Western way of thinking, in the Western part of the globe, we need to start rewiring how we think about consumption, how we think about nature.
Rewiring our heads.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or brains.
Yeah, or what we like to say, decolonize our minds. We need to rewire how we think about nature and how the natural resources are not a never-ending resource. And I think that from the Sami culture's perspective, I think that the Western world has a lot to learn, because we cannot continue the way we have been. And we do not, from us, the Sami people, we never take more than we should. And that has been something that we have been taught from generations to generations. Even though we are quite Western looking, we have a Western way of life, there is still, myself have been taught this from my parents, never take more than you should. And I think to incorporate this into what you asked, schools and education, then indigenous knowledge needs to be acknowledged, and it needs to be respected at the same level as other types of knowledge systems.
Yes, and because you said that the reduction of biodiversity is going down also in the Sami districts, but less fast than in the rest of the the Arctic, right? Yeah. What does that mean?
It means that we are a holder or protectors of nature. So whenever a new industry project comes and have interest in our homeland, we always hear from the majority society, oh, you guys are so negative. You always say no, 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 no. But what we are actually doing is that we are preserving nature. We are taking care of nature so that everyone, not just us, so that everyone who lives can also enjoy nature. And so our sort of protests is not to be difficult, it is to protect nature and the values that are that the nature holds.
You're representing the Sami people in Norway, Sweden, Finland, Russia. Do you think your voice is heard enough? Is your voice strong enough, and do we listen to you?
Internationally, we have quite a strong voice. We are one of the 6 permanent participants in the Arctic Council. And the Arctic Council is quite a good, I think it's the only international organization where indigenous peoples have such a strong voice and are actually at the same table as the states. So that in the Arctic Council, yeah, for sure, we are being listened to. And we have been working since the beginning to incorporate indigenous knowledge systems and indigenous ways of thinking into the Arctic Council. And we are seeing the result of that. That also scientists are becoming more aware, and the Sami Council is also have several projects where we're working together with Western scientists to come together and sort of merge indigenous knowledge systems and sort of this Western research system. At the national stage, and that might be a different question. I'm not sure if we feel at this moment that we are being listened to enough or that we're being respected enough at the national, within our national borders. And refer back to the Fosen case and the Supreme Court ruling, where there's been a year since the ruling happened and nothing has been done.
There was in the court 155 windmills are built, and the Supreme Court of Norway said they are illegal, but still they are there after.
Yeah, and they're operating and earning a lot of money on it, and the reindeer herders in the area have their indigenous rights violated every day.
Yes, Carmine, the Sami people is the only indigenous people in Europe. What's Italians? How does Italy think about this perspective, which Tony has given us?
Well, I said that for me it was really a very good news to see really the active role of Sami people, indigenous people in general in the Arctic Council, and we are very happy that the European Union also has a strong relationship with Sami people. Of course, we are part of the European Union, and we share this vision and these initiatives of the European Union, the European Commission, really, and in the relations with Sami people. At national, of course, I cannot. I don't want to comment, and I have no element to tell something about the relation between indigenous people and their own countries, of course, but it's really very important, and I see that there is a dialogue, there are strong voices of indigenous people there. That's really one of the points that we are proud in Europe and in general in the Western world, you know, to give voice to everyone, and I hope also political weight to all the opinions, all the points of view. As Italy, of course, we should and we would do more, really, because it's not so easy to find ways. We were talking exactly yesterday about ways of to try to have engagements also between scientists at scientific level, because at the beginning of our work as observers in the Arctic Council, we had contacts with some people, dialogue more on a political and institutional level. I think that the step that we have to do in this moment as Italy, but I think in general, is the involvement of indigenous people in concrete scientific projects, exactly to integrate different kind of knowledge, as you said. It's more difficult, but we have to accept this challenge.
It's nice. Actually, what Carmine is telling about is an idea from the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Italy to invite scientists, Sami scientists, to Italy to cooperate, right?
More than more than the Minister of Foreign Affairs, within the Arctic Scientific Committee that I chair, we are discussing about the possibility to find a way also to have more contacts between scientists between Sami scientists, or in general indigenous people scientists, and our researchers on concrete projects. And maybe a way could be also to start to put them together, because of course I cannot decide what they can do really. Only if they meet, of course they can do it. We are working within the Arctic Scientific Committee, not Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Thanks. Getting people together is always a good idea, right? Any questions to Tonje? Yes, Anna, come here. Anna's actually also a student at the master course.
Hi, my name is Anna Maria Marino and I'm a master student at COE. My question for you is, you have mentioned that Sami people are actively participating in regional governance. I guess environmental cooperation is very important for you, but the situation is much more challenging at the national level in Norway. And my question is, do you think that the Fosen case was sort of a wake-up call for the authorities to listen to Sami people before the project is even developed, like in this case, and to implement better rules and regulations regarding your participation in environmental impact assessment? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I think so, and I hope so, and I think that's maybe also I think it's also a wake-up call for international investors into these wind energy projects and other mining projects and etc. That they are seeing that it is actually an economic risk for them to invest in projects where the conflict has not been resolved, and we are seeing that more and more international investors have voiced their concern about planned energy or mining projects in Sápmi, in our homelands. And also I think that the national governments of not just Norway, we also have several projects that are also very problematic in Sweden and in Finland, and let's not talk about even Russia, but we see that globally there is a demand for new energy projects to have a social responsibility, and they are being set new global standards, and we expect that the nation states that we live within also follow suit, as well as national businesses who are within our national borders, that they also follow the new global standards that are being set. So yes, I think it is a wake-up call, and I think perhaps also that's why the Norwegian state is dragging their action, or haven't done anything about the case, because they're struggling to find a balance between the new global standards, but also I think it's if they have to take down the wind turbines.
Actually, they don't know what to do.
Yeah, they don't know what to do because this is a new situation. Was actually a historical ruling for the Sami people. This is the first time we have won such a big case, and it's not just impacting us who live in the Norwegian side, but it also has implications for those in Sweden and Finland. So I think it's a hugely difficult case for the Norwegian government to figure out what to do. But so, yeah, I think it is a wake-up call, and I really hope so, because if not, our future looks quite dark. So we are hopeful that they will be resolved in a good way as soon.
Thanks. More questions? Okay, then, thank you, Tonje. Then we go even more down to the earth, to the micro level. What characterizes concrete leadership under Arctic conditions, and how is actually business in the Arctic run? In this session, we will have two speakers. The first one is Bjørn Olsen, professor at the High North Center, Nord University Business School. Bjørn, prego.
Prego. Thank you, Boyd. The world, including the Arctic, is changing. And with that, leadership must and is changing. And so my claim is that Arctic leaders operate within a future laboratory, because the environmental, social, and economic trends and changes which the world are facing will hit the Arctic first. The temperature rise is higher the further north you get, 6 times higher. The urban-rural divide hits the Arctic at a higher rate than elsewhere. The decrease in people within working age is higher in the Arctic than elsewhere. And the green transition is more prominent in the Arctic than elsewhere. So in studying Arctic leadership, you're actually studying the future of leadership. Arctic leaders is also leading within a paradox. An abundance of natural resources, but a deficit of human resources, still we experience a much higher economic growth in the Arctic than elsewhere. First, some context and background. The EU Arctic strategy from October 2021 focus on ensuring that the Arctic remains safe, stable, sustainable, peaceful, and prosperous. While the EU strategy puts its main focus on remaining sustainable, being mostly concerned with environmental sustainability, Arctic leaders know that they need to balance environmental sustainability by also having a strong focus on being prosperous. Hence, Arctic leaders need to achieve a good balance between environmental, social, and economic sustainability. But to achieve economic sustainability, they are dependent on social sustainability, not only within their own organization, but also within the region where they operate. So hence, they need to have knowledge of and lead within the social, cultural, political, and economic system which they are part of. And those from outside the Arctic, such as the EU, including the Italian, also need such knowledge to be able to contribute effectively within the region. So how does Arctic leaders lead? Well, in the limited time I have, I will focus on social sustainability, which is focusing on people. The ambassador, Johan Wibe, said yesterday that we need people in the Arctic. What characterizes the Arctic is an abundance of natural resources, but the most important resource, people, is actually diminishing. So people in the Arctic is a limited resource. So what do leaders do when they have limited resources? Well, it's two things. One, they could try to acquire more resources, and secondly, they have to do more with less. First, they may try to acquire more resources, such as people. So how to attract more people to the Arctic, and especially young, educated people to the Arctic? Well, first of all, it's a question of creating interesting jobs, but also leaders need a stronger focus on purpose, i.e. explicitly define the purpose of the organization, because organization with a purpose is to create environmental, social, and economic sustainability is increasingly becoming more attractive, especially among the younger generation, such as Generation Z, than an organization where the main purpose is to make money, often at the expense of social and environmental sustainability. Arctic and the Arctic leaders are more infused with such purposes than elsewhere because it's essential for the long-term survival. So in general, Arctic leaders should be more aware of this potential and use it more strategically. But then secondly, how do you do more with less? Well, in the Arctic, we have a long tradition and a culture of no waste, like the Sami representative were arguing very good for. For instance, Indigenous people do more, do not only use part of the reindeer, they use the whole reindeer. They have a high food efficiency and an efficient food system. This is the basic idea of the circular economy, which is no waste. Leaders in the Arctic are somewhat infused with a no waste culture, also when it comes to scarce resources such as people. The aim is to use everything, to use more of the potential resource inherent in each employee. So less waste by using everything is also a question of reducing the kind of waste that is a result of a lack of engagement. Because one of the challenges leaders of the world are facing is lack of engagement among employees. For instance, in the US, findings reveal that only 30% of employees are fully engaged, which is a substantial waste of our limited resources. So the question then is, how do you create more engagement? Well, to create engagement, you need motivation. To motivate people, you have to satisfy 3 basic psychological needs: the need for feeling competent and contributing positively, the need for belonging, and the need for autonomy. Leaders of the Scandinavian Arctic are in the forefront related to creating engagement, both with their employees in the region and in the region, because they are placed in a contest with a number of societal values, such as the Scandinavian Arctic is an egalitarian society, equality is important, the power distance is low, we have a high level of trust between leaders and employees, and we even have a high level of trust between people, politicians, and the political and regulatory system. Openness is important, and we have a high level of autonomy for employees. So hence, leaders in the Scandinavian Arctic do more with less and secure that there are little human waste by emphasizing equality, trust, openness, autonomy, and caring to be essential when conducting their leadership. Then we have the international Arctic. What we see is an increased international interest in the Arctic, and an increased number of countries have developed their own Arctic strategies. For many Arctic leaders, the customers are outside the Arctic and have always been. Hence, Arctic leaders lead within international markets. And being international markets, you have to handle an increasingly turbulent and interconnected world. So we are facing a turbulent world with an increased level of change. It's a storm out there, and the wind is increasing in strength. People in the Arctic are used to storms and abrupt changing conditions. So having change as a basic cultural denominator, combined with a strong international orientation, where you have access to information from an increasingly changing world and the ability to act upon it, increase Arctic leaders' ability to make the necessary adjustments, to adapt and to transform. In this way, Arctic leaders have a great potential in creating resilience for their organization and the region, and in that, the potential of being inspirational for leaders around the world. So, in conclusion, I claimed in my introduction that in studying Arctic leadership, you are studying the future of leadership. Well, so what is the future of leadership? Well, it's a number of processes. Traditionally, we have seen leadership as a process of influence, whereby leadership has been all about influencing their employees, their followers. But leadership is increasingly becoming the process of purpose, a matter of contributing not solely to the profit of the company, but also to environmental and social sustainability. And Arctic leaders do that. It's also a process of transformation, adaptation and transformation, to be able to meet and tackle the challenges and turbulence created in an increasingly changing world. Having an international orientation where you get signals from a turbulent world and are able to act upon it is decisive. Arctic leaders do that. But it's still a process of influence, both internally and externally. But that influence is changing from leaders influencing employees toward a process where leaders influence by creating a culture where employees become engaged by meeting their need for feeling that they make a positive contribution also for society at large. The need for autonomy and the need for belonging, and Arctic leaders do that. But although European and Italian leadership may be different from Arctic leadership in some ways, we do have some common challenges and opportunities to pursue. The pursuit of purpose and societal contribution, a stronger international orientation, a stronger focus on adaptability and transformation, and the need to create engagement and well-being among our most valuable resource, which is people. And that's exactly what Arctic leadership is about, as Arctic leaders are in the forefront in meeting these challenges and opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Björn. You will be invited to ask questions to Björn afterwards. I just have to ask you one question. A famous international sociologist, Richard Florida, he has said that vital societies today need technology, tolerance, and talent. The Arctic, we have got technology. We have, I believe, we've got a growing tolerance for diversity in every sense. Yes, we've got talent, but we have got everything in the Arctic, in the Scandinavian Arctic. We've got everything except for one thing: people. We lack people, especially young people, 20 to 40 years. You have been talking about leadership, how important it is. My question is, does it work?
Well, as being a professor at a business school, if I said that leadership doesn't work, I'll be out of business. That's the first one. But research shows that leadership works. But I think that in extreme times, in times of crisis, where we are now, people call for leadership, and they call for strong leadership. But I think we should be aware, because strong leadership is not equal to dictatorship. Because strong leadership is about setting a purpose for the organization more cleanly. It's about being more open, also to ideas from employees. It's about values, being honest, caring, and treating people with respect. And it's about creating the understanding that we are in this together. That's my
Grazie, Professor. Let's go to Tromsø. Frode, Tromsø is one of the Arctic capitals of Norway. Agree? Yes, Bodø also. We go to Tromsø, to the biggest hotel in the northern part of Norway. Clarion Hotel, The Edge, Tromsø. And Managing Director, Ida Kristine Jacobsen. The floor is yours. And the screen.
Thank you very much. And thank you for putting up my presentation. I would like to start thanking the COI and the Embassy and High North Center for this invitation. It is an honor to be here for the first time, and I have been truly inspired so far, and I are looking forward to the rest of the day. I have in my presentation, I was supposed to start off with a video, but I will explain what is in the video in a little while. But before, oh, is it actually working? Does it have sound too? That's great. Just turn it up. Yeah. All right, I'll get back to the video in a little while, but for those that don't know me, I would also like to say a few words about me before I start. I am 35 years old. I have worked as a general manager already for 8 years. The 3 last year at Clarion Hotel The Edge, and the 5 years before that at a campsite called Tromsø Lodge and Camping. I am also a mom to 3 kids, and I have a very strong fiance who is also working as a leader. And it is completely possible for a 35-year-old educated woman to work as a leader in the Arctic. And that was important for me to say today. Great. Can I just use this for clicking? I have also studied, I have a bachelor's degree in hotel management and a master degree in leadership, innovation and market. I am truly passionate about leadership, and I will talk much about many of the same things as Björn has already actually mentioned. So, but enough about me. I will go slowly. I will talk a little bit about how I run a large international company in the Arctic. Clarion Hotel The Edge is a huge hotel. We have almost 200 employees that comes from about 40 different nationalities. The way I run the hotel is easy to say in one word. I do it by heart, and I do it together with my fantastic 8 department managers. I am only the support and go-to function for them. And as long as my managers has the tools they need and the confidence to make decisions, my overall job is to make sure that we are headed towards the vision while we deliver great results on people, planet, and profit. And I will get back to people, planet, profit at the end of my presentation. In the video I showed you in the beginning, it is actually an internal video, not to be shown externally. But we are known for being a bit rebellious up north, so I chose to do it anyway. And I did it because I'm here to talk about leadership. And this video is actually the first impression many of my employees get when they start working at Clarion Hotel The Edge. And the video is explaining our vision, our purpose. It is explaining that we are working to increase the quality of life for our guests and for our colleagues. And what is quality of life for you? There are so many different persons here today, so I can imagine that it has a lot of different meanings, quality of life. But my quality of life is increasing every time I get into our hotel, just because I feel so lucky to have these people as my colleagues. Our big differences is our super strength. And as a leader of this wolf pack, as we call ourselves, it is important for me to understand that the different aspects of lives that we all go through, how they affect us, and how the different aspects of life also can increase or decrease the quality of our life. Life is a key word here because we are humans. We are born, we grow up, and during our life, we sit in this roller coaster with ups and downs, with dreams and feelings. We get relationships, we end relationships, we get kids, our parents get older, we get sick, we get stressed, and all these different elements of life shapes our personality and how we look at the world. Some of my colleagues, they have fled from war or have other terrible life experiences. When so many different humans have found their way all the way up above the polar circle, we get a strong bond where we as individuals create a common meaning of what we do, and we set common goals for what we want to accomplish in life and at work. To be able to know each other, communication and feedback is key. And I was asked to share some reflections about whether there is a typical Norwegian Arctic leadership style, which was very interesting because I'm not sure if there is one, but I have heard from my colleagues that they experience people from the north as very inclusive. We are straight up, no bullshit. We are used to harsh, unfriendly climate, but the humans in the north are warm. We do not think of people with power as automatically being superb to us. You need to gain trust as a leader, and you have to work for it. Because your colleagues, they will challenge you or eat you up if you try to be a boss. So when you have succeeded in getting the trust, you have also gained respect. And I actually find it much more challenging to lead my colleagues that is not giving me direct upfront feedback, which is not used to the Arctic way of leading. And with employees from many other different countries, I need to work a bit harder to get into their personal core than I do with other fellow Norwegians. So then I need to work, of course, to be able to get feedback and to create this communication platform. And so we have put it into our strategy. We have employee service every second week. We have personal appraisals 2 times a year. And most importantly, it's very important for me and my department managers to be present and in the operations, using our ears more than we use our mouth. We have 2 ears for a reason and only 1 mouth. And we joke a lot with each other, maybe too much sometimes. And this is what creates our culture. And culture eats strategy for breakfast, we say. I love speaking in metaphors, and I often speak about our book of life, therefore this illustration. And when I have a colleague that is going through a rough time, I always remind them that this part is just 1 sentence, or maybe a chapter of their book. It can, if we will, let us define us for the rest of the chapters, or we can act, make decisions that makes a whole other story. For example, if you are about to run into the famous wall of fatigue, it is better that you take care of your mental well-being and body for a while to recharge and come back with energy, knowing that is a strength. Choosing to push yourself harder so you get into sick leave for a long period of time or quit is unfortunately what most people do. And as leaders, we have a special responsibility to be aware of this good girl syndrome, as we call it, and take care of our people. As humans, we have a tendency of having this individual short-term perspective in life, since we only experience the world from our point of view. We are a bit limited in that way. We can only really relate to each other if we have similar stories, and we can only act together towards the same goals if they have a meaning or a purpose to us. Personally, my motivation to start working for Nordic Choice Hotels and at Clarion Hotel The Edge was the vision of the mother brand Nordic Choice Hotels, which is with energy, guts, and enthusiasm, we create a better world because we care. That has a meaning and a purpose to me. And it has a meaning to all our thousands of colleagues that works in our 200 hotels across the Nordics. We actually say that you should only work for us if you strongly believe in our vision. We Care is our sustainable platform, and it is from that platform we engage in projects to reduce the numbers of youths that drop out from high school, where we create events to boost funding for cancer research, where we collect Christmas presents for kids that might not have gotten it elsewhere, and where we are critical to all our elements of our business, and a lot more. A sustainable company increases the quality of life for us that works in it and for our guests. I mentioned that my overall job is to share, get results on people, planet, and profit. And as you might have guessed by now, the vision and our common goals are the main drivers here. In my leadership recipe to achieve results, caring is my #1 secret ingredient. And the other ingredients I have put under these 3 different people, planet, and profit. And under people, for example, I have learned that assumptions is the mother of all evil. So I try to eliminate all assumptions by inspiring my team to constantly ask questions instead. I've also learned that curiosity creates knowledge and understanding, and recognition for your effort boosts motivation, and also recognition of important private events boosts loyalty. So birthdays is very important for me to remember. I have also learned that showing vulnerability is a superpower. I am very honest about my feelings, and I am never afraid to cry, for example, while I'm giving someone credit, or if I have to make terrible decisions. When I sent my team into layoff during the pandemics, I cried because I care for them and I love my people, and they could see it, and they could actually understand that this was a decision that I didn't want to make, but I had to for the survival of their company and the workplace. We also learned that diversity breeds thousands of different ideas and solutions, and we have room for all. Purpose I have already mentioned, and of course engagement is important for us to succeed. When we think about our environment, of course we need to think sustainability in everything we do. And when we are talking about profit, we also think about operational excellence, having the correct people at the correct time, at the correct place. Super important. But through all of this, caring is the #1 key. We say that people always comes first, and I strongly believe that leadership is an action, not a position. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ida. You were saying that culture is eating strategy for breakfast. No, actually, you've been to Rome for 5 days, right? First, you were 3 days together with your husband, holidays only with your husband for the first time for 5 years. Then you've been alone because he had to go home to take care of the children.
Yeah.
What is the smell and taste? What smell and taste of culture have you experienced during your 5 days in Rome?
Oh, a lot. I have been so inspired by the way Rome has preserved so much of the history. I've also seen that some of our huge differences is that in Norway, we seem to have a lot of mediocre products and services, while here in Italy you have a huge gap between full service and really, really bad as well. So it's a huge difference there. So yeah, I've experienced a lot, but yeah, it's many similarities, but also many differences.
I suppose you try to anticipate what kind of leadership is at this hotel. What do you feel?
Well, I have stayed now at 2 different hotels, and of course, I'm always curious about that. How do people work to inspire, to motivate, to actually get everyone going? So I have not found the answer, but I have also experienced that it's a huge difference when you are walking around in town, whether I am dressed up wearing my business clothes or if I'm dressed up as a tourist. As a tourist, I have experienced that I see that you can get tricked into tourist traps, and because we trust each other in Norway, and I see that that's also a little vulnerability that we have, that we are having this huge trust in everyone.
One question, which actually is very rude to ask in Norway, but since I'm a long way from home, I ask it. You are a mother of 3 small children. How is it possible to combine that with being a manager for 200 persons?
Well, it's completely possible because we do have great welfare systems in Norway. We have kindergartens, which is working perfectly, and I also have a very strong fiance, which I mentioned. So of course there will always be challenges, but yeah, I know it's rude because I actually get provoked by that question because like I also said, that we get hired first and foremost due to our competence, not to our gender, and that's really important. So it's completely possible. The same goes for, he has the same challenges at work. My fiance, he needs to stay home with sick kids too. So it's the same challenge for men and female, but we get that question more, which is a bit of a problem. We shouldn't get that question at home.
You've got employees from 40 countries, and lots of your employees are belonging to the generation Zeta, people born after 1995. How does these two things influence on your way of managing?
Well,
differences, countries and young people.
Well, young people are very, they need more feedback than others. We have been growing up in a social media society, so I need to give my thumb up to everything they do if they do a good job. So it's
at
more
once.
At once, yes. I cannot come 5 days later telling that was a great job. So I see that feedback is important, but also that they want to have a meaning in what they do. They want to have a saying in what we do. They want to be a part of creating our strategy. They want to be involved in everything, which is great. And I also see a big challenge, and this is also from a service perspective, because working in a hotel, we also see a difference now in the way young people think of equality. Service people, we have always been the lowest in the hierarchy of the society, but we also see now more and more that our young people, they are also standing up for themselves, and that's also important for Nordic Choice as a company, that we say that we have room for all. So bullying and stuff like that is, yeah.
By the way, Tromsø is also actually the Sami capital. How do you include this perspective?
I'm a bit Sami myself. Both my grandfathers were actually Sami, so we are sure that we celebrate the Sami National Day, the 6th of February each year. And yeah, as all other employees, it's important to also, of course.
Yes. And actually, I believe, and you believe, and I hope you believe too, Tony, that as I was saying, the tolerance for diversity is growing in Norway. It has been changing during the 10, 20, 30 last years. Björn, what kind of leadership is that? What Ida is talking about?
Well, what she is talking about is actually a big part of Arctic leadership, the way she is talking, and the way I was presenting Arctic leadership. So it's very similar. And we didn't talk together about it in forehand, so it's from an academic point of view, I'm very pleased. The real world looks a bit like I think.
Yes. Björn, you were actually saying that the High North is a laboratorium for leadership.
Yeah.
In 1 minute, give us 2 or 3 scenarios for the leadership in the future.
Leadership in the future, if you but first of all, I think that temperature rise will increase the focus on environmental sustainability, but it will also create new leadership, and you will probably see new business models taking advantage also of these changes, but also the rate of change will increase, putting out stronger emphasis on adaptability and transformation, which will be more important. But I also think that due to the increase of the elderly proportion of our population, the proportion of people in the working age will decrease. So employees will increasingly be seen as a scarce resources. So they have to be utilized better. So I see a much stronger focus on how to create engagement among employees to more fully utilize their potential. So I think in short, you will see a stronger focus on a no waste culture, both when it comes to people, but also how we handle other resources. So more toward a circular economy and more toward a circular economic thinking, but also when it comes to people, not only to products. Yeah.
Thanks. Ida?
But this is also a quite huge structural problem, because we also see that in northern parts of Norway especially, and I mentioned dropout of youths from high school, it's tragic to see that so many young people, they don't know what they want to do, so they just drop out. They don't continue their studies. That's a huge problem. It's actually one of three in the northern parts of Norway. So it's important that we also try to think of our workplaces more like flexible. Why should it be like that? If you are educated to work in a hotel, you should do that for the rest of your life, or a doctor, or whatever you do. Why don't we build structures and systems that creates a flexibility that you can do that for 3 years, 5 years, but then you can change, and that will be the new normal, I think. And we need to try to adapt our society more to that as well.
Actually, I believe that's also the case in Italy. Lots of young people don't work, don't go to school. What should we do about it? But does anybody have any questions to Björn or Ida? No questions? Then I've got the last challenge to you, dear panel. You shall not talk about what you have said yourself. But my question is, what do you think? What do you want should be the audience's takeaway message from this panel? What should these people remember when they leave this building after this panel? What's the takeaway message? Not what you have said yourself, but what you have heard. Okay, Björn, I start with you.
Well, first of all, you should think of Arctic as a fantastic place to be. That's one thing. The second is that I think in general in Europe and in Italy, some people get surprised when they go up there, because what they see is a very modern society, especially in the Scandinavian Arctic, where it's a modern society and it's people living there, not only ice bears and all of that. But I think also that, well, we're facing challenging times. We have a war in Europe, we have increased inflation, we have high energy prices, we have high interest rates, and the prospect of lower economic growth. So I think to meet these challenges, we need leadership. And Arctic leadership might be inspirational, not only to us in Arctic, but I think also to leaders elsewhere also in the world. And like I put forward, what we have in common is that the pursuit of purpose and societal contribution. I think that's important. Also to have a stronger international orientation, a stronger focus on adaptability and transformation, and the need to create engagement and well-being among our most valuable resource, which is people. Because we are in this together, everyone.
Thank you. Carmine, you started with the big picture. Afterwards, we have been hearing about meso and micro perspective. What do you think we should remember from this?
Well, there are different levels. Sorry. But, there are different levels of leadership and governance, and we have to learn, especially our young part of the audience, you know, the students here, to think at different levels, combining them understanding that you can contribute at different level also to the general picture. And also to think in a complex way, you know, to start to not to focus only on one aspect of your life or each problem. And I think that the Arctic is a good example of that, as I explained also at the beginning, because there is a multi-level governance, there are different point of views, and you can also jump from the big picture to the concrete world, considering that you are part of the general of this general framework. And then of course young people is very important. This is obvious for everywhere, but also in the Arctic, and for the new challenges that we have in front of us, that are the actual really challenges. And I want to remember, for example, that last year Italy, in co-hosting COP26 and in the G20 presidency, had a special attention to young people and young leadership, really for the challenges of the environment and climate change. So we think really that we intend to go on with this policy.
Thank you. Ida?
Well, the world is a complex place, and what we have discussed yesterday and also today shows the examples of the complexity that we have. I always experience that when we start to talk about these complex issues, climate change, war, all these big issues, it's difficult to find the solutions, and we are looking for leaders to take responsibility for what is happening. And what also Björn said a bit earlier today, that dictatorship might not be the solution here, but the world doesn't have time for democracy right now. We need to have leaders that also have broad involvement, that inspires people to act before we get probably laws and systems in order. Because that's what I see is happening now. We are waiting for the politicians, we are waiting for everyone to do something, but we also have a responsibility to act. But leadership is crucial. So my takeaway from this, especially to the young students, to challenge everything.
Thank you. Tonja?
Well, I think that hearing that you all should take from this panel is that all of us care very, very much about the Arctic, and that the Arctic is full of people. So when you are dealing with these big geopolitical issues in your research, or dealing with climate change issues and looking for solutions, remember that all actions that are taken affects us heavily. Everything affects us in the Arctic. So please remember us when you are looking for new policy solutions. And I really like what Ida said about flexibility, because that's also something that we in the Sami Council talks a lot about, that being able to adapt to the new world, to the new situation that we're in when it comes to climate change and also the social situation, is we need flexibility. We need flexibility when with the use of our land areas. We need more flexibility when use of new species that comes to the Arctic. So yeah, the flexibility is something that I really like that you mentioned. So yeah, please remember us when you do trying to negotiate new policies, because we are affected by it and we are the Arctic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening on screen. Give the panel a hand. Strålende.
Det är väldigt varmt uppe här.
Easier, I know.
And then Selari, he is ill, but he will make a presentation by video. And then Ludvig, you finish off.
Yeah.
Talking about
Yeah. We do the international perspective.
Vi stoler på Equinor.
Ja.
Knut, vi stoler på Equinor.
Ja, får gjøre det da. Det går bra.
Ja, for hvis ikke så...
Ja.
Så gjør vi dere om.
Det er vel akkurat det også. Sånn er det å være statseid, ikke?
So, Marco, number 1. That's done. Number 2, the picture, including the video. Number 3 is Tom. 4th is Selari from his sick bed. And 5th is
Ja. Skal du inn etter meg? Nei. Jeg skal inn siste. På filmen? Ja, men
it's happening more and more. Now we are on the spot because of this supply crisis, and everybody is asking how is Italy coping with that. It's the role of African resources because Eni is very well positioned in Africa. So this is every week it happens that we have 1 or 2, at least. Opportunities or invitations, and you take it or not. But, the Arctic is unbelievably very very covered in the recent years. Very much more than ever, I would say. And you would wonder why, because I think it's because of climate change and not because of the war. But now the war is also, say, pushing on that.
Men altså, hva er vitsen? De har jo satellitter som ser det. Eller har de ikke det, du ser? Er det amerikanere?
Oh, ja.
Det kan hende.
Yeah. Okay. No.
Are we ready? Yes. 1:40. Will we finish? We are a little bit late. So we'll finish. 1:10. Okay? Okay, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, dear panelists, the topic for discussion is Europe's energy crisis and the need for cooperation. Of course, we'll have an Arctic angle on that. It's a very timely, very complicated, and a huge topic. So we have tried to sort of do this a little bit in steps. The first step is what is the problem? And the second step is what are the solutions? So we have tried to sort of get everybody in line to do this. We'll have presentations from the people here up here. Over to Norwegian friends. They will speak with one tongue. So at one point of the proceedings, one person will speak and the other person will speak. But apart from that, it should be fairly uncomplicated. And I see also that finding heavy people from the energy industry, heavy in the sense of being very competent, is difficult to get women into this. So we are an all-male setup here. I cannot do anything but sort of apologize for that, but I'm sure these gentlemen will do as best as they can. Okay, the background. We could have a whole seminar on just the background of what's happening in the international energy markets. All I can say is that following the invasion, Putin's invasion of Ukraine, what we have seen is a dramatic increase in energy prices, and especially gas prices that have increased by a factor of 4 to 5 compared with their normal level. And since we also are in a European setting where the power prices are almost one-to-one correlated with gas prices, you end up with huge electricity prices. So all of this is the backdrop for a very, very bleak winter ×3. If really not very much happens to this situation, we will have a very difficult winter. We'll have a very difficult next winter, or we might even have a difficult third winter. Why do we have this increase in prices of gas? I'm not going to give you a lecture on that, but all I can say is that given that suddenly there are 155 BCM disappearing from the international gas markets, then your basic economics tells you that if you take that out of a market, then something happens to the price. And that's exactly what you have seen in the European gas prices. Anyway, so here there is a very clear link between geopolitics and energy. Now, I will not go further than that. All I can say is that let's again focus on what are the challenges, what are the problems with the view on the Arctic. That's what I asked people to sort of address. I've asked them to say they have a little bit of quite ample time, up to 7 to 8 minutes each. And we have one person who is online. I hope that I hear that Professor Parnello, you are, sorry, Mr. Solari, Professor Solari, I hope you don't have a COVID, but at least I understand that you are quite ill. So thank you for joining us. And so I'll pick it up as we go along. The first person out who will address the issue is Mr. Pireda, Marco Pireda from Eni. So you have 7, 8 minutes. I will gently do this for everybody. When you reached 7 minutes, I will gently remind you of that. And at 8 minutes, I just cut off your microphone. So anyway, so the floor is yours, Marco. Go ahead.
Thank you, Noor. Thank you very much for having me today. I'm in charge of international affairs issues in Eni. I think in Italy everybody knows Eni. Eni is an energy company present in about 70 countries in the world, with 30,000 people working, 10,000 of them abroad, and many also in Norway and other northern regions, Alaska, for example. So thank you for leaving me this easy task to open the issue of the interrelations between the energy crisis and the Arctic region. Let me start with a simple, straightforward message. I believe that in these very hard, unprecedented times, we are looking for solutions desperately to replace Russian supplies. Well, I think that Arctic resources, is it okay? Okay. Arctic resources
will not be the solution to the short-term crisis. And I would also add that it will not be also a relevant big part of the solutions, since it will not be one single solution. So, and then I will try to motivate this statement. This is not because there are not enough resources in the Arctic. Talking about conventional oil and gas energies, but also, and I would say even more significantly as regards new energies, new resources, critical minerals for producing minerals or for the nuclear sector. This is not because of that. There are huge energy sources in the region. May we start projecting the presentation, please? For example, in terms of oil and gas potential, there are estimates saying that in the region you can have around 400 billion barrels of oil equivalent, and most of it, let's say around 70%, is gas. Being gas, the resource that will accompany the energy transition for the next decades, at least until 2040, 45, the potential is really relevant, and the potential is something that, of course, many international companies have been developing. Having said that, most of these resources are problematic, are difficult to develop, and in most of the countries having jurisdiction in the Arctic, the exploration and production of oil and gas is stopped. For example, Greenland, Canada, for the main part. The last message for this opening slide is that, let's say, around half of the resources in the area, talking about conventional oil and gas, but are also critical minerals, rare earths, are in Russia or in the Russian jurisdiction, which is an additional, let's say, complication nowadays, or at least another element to be considered. Let me go on and just give you a few numbers on the rare minerals and critical minerals. Well, the potential is really huge, and these are key for developing wind turbines, batteries for storage, solar panels. We are talking about cobalt, but also for, as I was saying before, for the nuclear industry. For example, uranium. The problem is, again, that most of these resources lie in regions that are not open to development for many reasons, be it societal license or social license or environmental issues. And anyway, it is a potential that we can take and keep in mind when thinking about the future of energy of the planet and the Arctic. Now, a couple of comments, second part of my introduction on Russia and the strategy of Russia, of course, relating to this new situation, awkward situation that we are living since February. First consideration, Russia has been working for years to develop and invest on the Arctic region in terms of energy production and exports. The idea is that is that of a shifting of the balance to east and north in order to produce more energy in the Arctic region and export it to the prevailing markets of Asia. Already today, Russia is producing half of its production in the Arctic region. So it's by far the main player. If you see here, you will probably have already let's say, seeing this map underlying the different routes and advantages in terms of cost and days to reach Asia from the Arctic with the eastern northern or the classical route, which is also related, of course, to the climate change and the availability of this route in winter. But the only thing I would like to underline in the source of this light is Novatek. Novatek is one of the big players that have been investing in the Arctic LNG, which is the last slide I will spend here. Here you see the increased production of LNG, which is liquefied natural gas, from Russia. Now we are about 35 MTPA per year, and they have been planning for years to reach more than 100. Will they reach this objective? Well, this is under scrutiny.
7 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, my final message is after the crisis, after the war, part of this potential that is really huge because it's more than double, tripling the present production, and most of it would go to Asia or elsewhere. Well, most of this additional production capacity is under, let's say, doubt because Western companies are going back from the projects. Not all of them. For example, the Japanese are wary about this, and they need finance. They need technology. So there is a potential that might be, let's say, not fully implemented in the next years. I will stop here and, of course, come back on this later.
Very useful start off and a reminder of your key message that this is not the short-term solution that we find here. So that's very useful. Now let's shift kind of focus. We have now talked about the huge geo-economic issues. Now let's zoom into a concrete small project, not a small project for the municipality of Berlevåg, but in a global setting, this is a small setting. But what it says, and we will have the mayor of Berlevåg talking about what a green hydrogen project in the far north of Norway entails. What are its challenges? What are its possibilities? So, Rolf, the floor is yours, and you have 7 minutes.
Thank you. Yes, it's working. Hello, my name is Rolf Laupstad. I'm the mayor of Berlevåg municipality, and I'm pleased to be in Rome for the first time. And I should have some slides up yet. Yes. Berlevåg is in the real Arctic. We are as high up as you can come, and long east. We're far east than Istanbul. So we're up. You can see it. There is the 80–90% of Berlevåg, what you're seeing. The sea in the background, it's the Barents Sea. The next stop is Svalbard. And I said that we're far eastern Turkey. I have to get this. The crisis in Europe, as I see it from an Arctic point of view, is the lack of enough renewable power. And Mr. Putin. The green shift may have come upon us sooner than we first thought. In addition, the war in Ukraine has accelerated the need of the more self-sufficient with renewable energy. In Berlevåg, we have one of Europe's most efficient wind farms, but we lack the grid to get the power out. That is why we have worked with both hydrogen and ammonia as an energy carrier instead of the grid. We in Berlevåg can be a part of the solution. We have a lot of energy, but we have a few people to use the energy on. We must work together to create a well-functioning market for the hydrogen and the ammonia so that we can get the energy out to those who need it. The development of the infrastructure for hydrogen and ammonia is something that both Italy and Norway must contribute to. The renewable energy production in Berlevåg will be a part of the solution to Europe's energy crisis, but we must speed up the infrastructure in Europe. Are you fixing the picture for me? Okay, that's good. One back.
One back, Marco, yeah.
Excellent. This is the situation in Berlevåg today. We are a small municipality. We are a one-sided business with fishery, but we're the fourth biggest municipality in Finnmark on fishery. But still, it's a one-sided business. The negative population has been every year since 1980. We are half of the inhabitants what we was in 1980. We are around 900 people, and it helps that we have actually 5-6 Italian living in Berlevåg and having a great life. But we could take 50 more if somebody want to come. Young people, the Italian is old too. The population is getting older, and the lack of competence, we have a problem with that, and we have no risk capital in Berlevåg. The big problem for us in Berlevåg it's the lack of a grid. We don't have the grid because we need power in. We have a power plant who produce 200 megawatts, but in a big production of ammonia and hydrogen, we need more power in to Berlevåg. And that's a problem for us. And this takes, the grid is going to come, but at least it's going to take 6, 7, 8 years. And we don't have the time for that. We want it yesterday. I'm going to show you a little movie. And Kjell, who is from Berlevåg, is going to tell you more about the solution. But we're going to see a film. And yeah, I had to do it in my part to get the time for it. Yeah.
That's fine. Great.
It takes a few seconds before it starts. We need its own, yes.
Yes.
If not, I'm going to sing, and that's not good.
So that everybody can get access to clean and reliable energy. With hydrogen and ammonia, we can achieve fantastic things. We can make shipping and other industries zero emission. We can even make sure that every society, even those without a proper power grid, can receive clean and reliable energy. At Aker Clean Hydrogen and Varanger Kraft, we are, among other things, trying to make the Arctic zero emission. In Berlevåg, we have access to energy from one of Europe's most efficient wind farms. Here, we are building one of the world's first factories for the production of green hydrogen and ammonia. To make hydrogen, you only need water and electrical power. By extracting nitrogen from the air and adding hydrogen, you get ammonia. The ammonia is cheap and easy to transport, and it can, for instance, be used as fuel for engines and in power plants instead of natural gas, diesel, and coal. The surplus of oxygen and heat from the factory can be used in local industry, everything from fish farming to vegetables. The ammonia from the factory is loaded onto tankers and then transported to the consumers. Our partners Grieg and Wärtsilä are aiming to build the world's first zero-emission tanker that even runs on green ammonia. The ship, named MS Green Ammonia, will transport the green ammonia to the consumers emission-free. Clean and reliable energy for everybody.
from the European Space Agency. Now, in the last, I think it goes a bit slow. Yeah, go. So in the last 30 years, the European Space Agency has been, and I would say, in the front line in monitoring the Earth of our planet, measuring the effect that natural and anthropogenic changes are having on our society. Now, the polar regions, and in particular the Arctic, have always been at the heart of our space programs, also because many countries of the Arctic are part of ESA. And this has been possible always thanks to international collaboration. You can see in the slide basically all the satellites which have something to do with the Arctic, and the yellow ones are the ones which have a focus on Arctic, including CRISAT. ESA launched its first observation satellite, IRIS-1, in 1991, and marking already at that time an historic milestone, initiating a new era in satellite technology, international and scientific cooperation for Earth science, Earth system science. And since then, we have launched several satellites, have been launched into space, addressing scientific and I would say a variety also of societal and challenges, and placing now Europe as a leader in Earth observation. And this is happening in difficult times, I would say, when the extreme heat events in the Arctic are becoming more and more relevant, when we know that the Arctic sea ice is continuously decreasing and is projecting now to reach I would say, a free ice condition summer around 2050 or even before in all scenarios from the IPCC, when new lands of the northern hemisphere are becoming more accessible because of the thawing of the permafrost. And this is, as we know, is posing at the same time new challenges from environmental challenges, but at the same time also security, not to mention the fact that all the gases which are trapped in the Arctic, if we all count them together, methane and the CO2 altogether count or a factor about 2 of what we have already in the atmosphere. And polar waters are now opening, and we have seen this already in the previous talks, and even in this panel, are opening in shipping and to other industries that are eager to exploit the regions bound of natural resources, including oil, gases, and metals like gold, iron, and rare earth, used in any equipment we are using today, and also necessary, we'll say essential for creating what we call the green energy. Out of our next missions, we call the Sentinel expansion mission to be launched in this decade. 3 of them already have a focus on the Arctic, on the Arctic region. And in addition to these Sentinel missions, we have of course Earth explorers like 2 of the one which I am responsible of, which are continuously demonstrating showing breakthrough science and technology, not only for the scientists, and this is important also, but also to help society and trying to deliver an outstanding range of scientific findings. We all, and this has been already said before, we are on a red alert for our planet with a climate crisis, which is probably the most urgent and difficult challenge that humanity is facing in the era of post-industrialization. And thanks to the data we are collecting from our tools, from our satellites, we have started to understand what are the implications of climate change. And we have learned that what is happening in the Arctic is not only a problem for the Arctic, but it's a problem for all the regions of the world, for every continent and for any ocean. I was listening before said that sometimes the policies of the policymakers are affecting the Arctic. I would say actually there's also the opposite. Everything which is happening in the Arctic is affecting the whole world. And we are becoming more aware that climate change is not only an environmental issue, an academic topic for researchers and scientists, but it's strongly going to affect our economy, several industry sectors, including the energy one. We have already listened to this. And it's going to affect our society, the way we think about our society, and also our lives, like any natural man-made crisis in the future. Fossil fuels probably will continue to dominate the energy supply for some time, simply because our economy is based on this, and it will take some time before we can go to a new economy, to a new way of producing energy and using energy. From space, let's see. From space, we can measure just move on, yes. From space, we can measure the consequences of human activities, like the increase of carbon dioxide, okay, methane, and the effect even of pollution, like nitrogen dioxide. And we have no doubt, and this is what you see here, we have no doubt that this compound is a production of human activities, because we notice a clear reduction up to 50%, 60% in some areas during the lockdowns. As soon as the lockdown stopped, I would say the pollution started. And for the first time, if we looked at China in March last year, 2020 now, we saw an increase of pollution while Italy and Europe was going to lockdown. And the first time the pollution was a sign of, I would say, a positive sign, because China was going out. Furthermore, I think with the current geopolitical situation, it's probably going to be a change in the energy policy of Europe, and prioritizing the short-term national energy security over the long-term European decarbonization effort. But at the same time, everyone and us, ESA, we are dedicated to meeting the commitments and targets of the Paris Agreement, the European Green Deal, carbon neutrality by 2050, enabling and supporting innovative space-based technologies and applications that address the clean energy ecosystems and support the growth of a sustainable, say, green economy. These goals are impossible in our view to implement and to verify without continuous Earth observation missions from space. And to conclude, next month, ESA will have its Ministerial Council and will present an ambitious program, rich and diversified. Our plans for the next years are very relevant to these challenges, and we will stress how urgently Europe needs to further develop its own space capability to address them.
Thank you very much. And just one question. I mean, the space activities are a growing industry in the Arctic. Can you just very briefly say something about that?
Well, yes, okay. Well, as I said before, some of the countries which are in the Arctic are important member states for ESA, and in the Arctic we have our ground stations acquisitions for polar satellites. So basically, it's an industry which is closely integrated, I will say, in the economy of space in Europe.
But your point was that it was linked to the green shift.
As well.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, next one out is our digital. Next one out is our digital participant. I hope you are capable of saying something without coughing. Is that, Paolo, is that more or less correct? Can we hear you?
Thank you very much. It's not a good day for me. It's a complicated day, but I'm honored to be here and to tell you something about cooperation in transport system. I try to share. It's okay?
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, cooperation in transport and logistics is fundamental to create the right condition for new reliable routes as Arctic routes, and to prevent supply chain shocks that could contribute to increase not only petrol and gas price, but all of commodities. And just introduce the global value and the direction of the international maritime flows. I'll show you these few slides to indicate supremacy of Southeast Asia in the global traffic, maritime traffics. Despite several periods of crisis, and commercial flows have grown steadily over the past 25 years, with a slight decline in the first half of 2020 due to the pandemic, but rising again from the third quarter of 2020, despite the production crisis in Southeast Asia due to the shortage of raw materials and the lack of empty container. And China and East Asia hold the 70% of the input capacity in the maritime market. And this group of countries and general shipping companies aim to reduce the risk and to find new opportunities. That's why the topics that we have to debate is related to commercial speed, reliability, and vulnerability of the new routes. These countries and this sector of the world, Southeast Asia, have a special focus on the security of the maritime traffic along the traditional route, especially in the Indian Ocean, that was elected as a pivot of global trade. The route to Malacca and Suez, and the one that encounters the most geopolitical choke points, as I show here, and they're sensitive to geopolitical changes, and which have already in the past given rise to phenomena such as piracy or technical incidents similar to March 23, 2021, with Ever Given ship in Suez channels. So the alternative to Malacca and Suez route could be the Belt and Road overland routes and Arctic routes and Cape Town route, but Cape Town route involves an 8,000 miles extension of the route and an additional cost about $500,000. So what about the Arctic maritime routes? The main route that we have to talk about today is the NSR. Which are the interests about NSR? There are geopolitical interests, giving Russia a role in global maritime relations, and geoeconomical interest to give the Siberian gas and oil fields a chance to be transported to more Western terminals and to strengthen Russia's role as a producer of hydrocarbon. And the route is expected to grow in 2030 about 100 million of tons. These are very low figures compared to 1 billion tons in the Indian Ocean routes, but we have to conclude that Arctic route is not alternative, is not competitive, but alternative to Suez route. And the Arctic, perhaps it could configure as a kind of Arctic Mediterranean and not Arctic mid-ocean as our Mediterranean. In fact, the regional traffic are dominant at the date. There are some technical disadvantages for international global shipping as a medio oceano for Arctic. The depth of ports, especially related to shipping gigantism, ice condition during the year, navigation safety, waste management and environment protection, lack of infrastructure along the route, and lack of rescue, and sailing speed reduced in the ice contest. What are the economic disadvantages? Lack of inland markets related to ship gigantism. There are no gateway ports in Siberian route that could serve inland markets, sufficient inland markets in Siberia. Insurance costs and icebreaker escort cost. So there are real advantages, or it's only a geopolitical rhetoric when we talk about Arctic routes. There is a shorter distance from Asia to Europe, yes, but it's valid only for some ports. to Busan port, Yokohama port, and only for some Chinese North China ports, and not for all European ports, only for northern rate ports. There is a lower security risk, free of choke points, but at the other side, there is a risk of geopolitical, Russian geopolitical role. There is a fuel consuming saving. No, it's not real, because fuel consuming in Arctic is not predictable. Planning new infrastructure with foreign development investment, direct investment, yes, but who has really interest in new ports for global route in Arctic? And the interest, yes, and the interest of shipping companies. At the moment, only Maersk had a test with Benta, and the CEO of Maersk called the experiment interesting, but not revolutionary and competitive with Southern Ocean routes. An example of the impact in terms of days and in terms of truck fuel consumption. The orange and the red red line significantly means the over the average of consumption. So conclusion: Arctic is still a test area, and because many issues have to be clarified. And we have to face on in front of geopolitical scenario with Russia situation, and which could be the flows of the future in terms of, because now we, after the pandemic period, we assist a new phenomenon, the reshoring, that could reduce the global flows from Eastern Asia and Europe. Thank you.
Thank you. Very quick question. The present crisis, do you think it will increase the probability of using the Northern Sea route, or do you think it will detract from that possibility?
This is the slide I show now. This is the present situation. So we have no international flows, international ships in the Arctic at the moment. So I think that the traditional route today are the most important, and I think that Russia has to solve its problem before to define her as a maritime.
Thank you.
As a maritime actor.
That's a very clear answer, and so we'll strike that possibility out in as long as this conflict goes on. So that's fine. Now let's move to the last person, last but not least, person from Equinor of Norway, Knut Vidar Larsen. The floor is yours.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and I want to thank you all for making this conference, and also me for being able to attend, the opportunity to attend and also speak. So it's a really pleasure to, and I've learned a lot from the previous days. So really good. And we're also facing an extraordinary situation where energy is essential. So based on, yes, there's the presentation as well. My name is Knut Vidar Larsen. I'm the head of the Barents Sea in Equinor, related to exploration and production. I've been living in and working in the northern part of Norway for almost my whole of life. I'm grown up at a farm in Harstad, and I'm also been studying and benefited from Nord Universitet, both in Harstad and in Bodø, related to my education. And working related to the sea, but also the offshore industry, my whole professional career. But also enjoying the nature and mountains in my spare time. So it's a really good place to live. But the energy situation in Europe is very challenging. And we see that governments and the EU are working hard to protect households, but also businesses from the high energy prices. Equinor is a long-term, reliable supplier of energy to Europe. And currently, our most important contribution to the energy crisis is to maintain safe and reliable gas exports. 37% of Europe's current imports are from Norway. But the Norwegian continental shelf are at a crossroad, and with high pace heading towards an energy transformation. We aim to generate cash flows from oil and gas, and we have done that for the last decades, and while reducing emissions from our operations. The cash flow will be used to our portfolio, but also invest in the transition and create value for shareholders and society. As it has for the community at the picture, Hammerfest City, brand protected as the world's northernmost located city. You could also, in the background, see Melkøya, an island where the LNG plant of Equinor, operated by Equinor, is located, transporting an LNG vessel of cargo every 5th day to the world's markets. And a workplace for 300 to 500 people, depending on the activity level, in a city with a population of 10,000. Melkøya and the Barents Sea is also an area where we build competence on CCS. The asset has been capturing CCS from its production start back in 2007 and injecting the CO2 back into separate reservoirs. And at this crossroad towards a low carbon future, Equinor has set clear ambitions to transform to a broad and global energy company becoming net zero by 2050, including Scope 3 emissions. And we will do that by accelerating our industrial position, especially within offshore wind, but also position ourselves for success within CCS, low carbon solutions, and hydrogen, aiming for CCS leadership in Europe. And the company also recently launched the Energy Transition Plan, a plan that is based on collaboration. Collaboration is fundamental. This includes also to allocate more of the cash flow towards renewable low carbon solution. And the goal is to allocate 50% of the annual gross capital towards renewable solutions. So this provides a clear guide for the company to continue on the long-term goal and value to progressively lower emissions. In connection to the facility landfall in Hammerfest, as you could see in the back of this picture, it's also currently being assessed if we could transport part of the well stream, the gas, towards a low carbon solution with blue ammonia. That is together with Vår Energi, partly owners of Eni, and also Horisont Energi. It's called Barents Blue. Yes. So, Petter, you asked what is the problem in the north. And as you can see from the picture, our operations in the Barents, it's limited. It's currently limited. The infrastructure is built on Snøhvit in Hammerfest, you could see, and no pipe connection to the NCS further south. So the foremost north pipeline is connected to Aasta Hansteen. You could see it in the middle of the picture. And the development of Johan Castberg, operated by Equinor, that will be put on stream in 2024. So that's further north than Snøhvit, with Eni as a partner. I have not mentioned Goliat, but that's also an oil field in Barents, operated by Vår Energi, partly owned by Eni. So, but currently we are working on investment decisions on Wisting. So the map could look like this in the future. An oil field that would be electrified from shore, and we are aiming for an investment decision this year. So related to gas, there are
7 minutes.
There are no large reserves to be developed short term in the Barents Sea. It's more about accelerating the gas resources that are there through new infrastructure, pipe, extending the LNG capacity, or low carbon solutions such as Barents Blue. So to build on low carbon solutions with low emissions, we need infrastructure, and infrastructure in terms of power, but also extended power. So, but this also creates discussions on the area utilization and how it should be treated. And Statnett, that is the state's infrastructure responsible heading this maturation of the lines. So things that could be solved, and we will get there together, and I very much look forward to the discussions afterwards also on what is the solution on these issues.
Fine, thanks. And that takes the first session, sort of, what are the challenges, what are the difficulties, what are the problems? And we have had different views. It seems to me that we have to address one basic question. And I go back to yesterday and what the EU was saying. And I want to pick up on that discussion and take it into this panel. Because the question, the basic question that we have to address is are we faced with a geopolitical problem in the Arctic? Will it then go away? Or are we basically faced with a climate problem? The green shift, I mean, there are two people here who have been relating directly to the green shift. It's the space people and the green hydrogen. And then you have the two oil companies or the energy companies that both are involved in the green shift. But my first question to you, is there anybody who wants to pick up on, are we faced basically with a challenge of climate or of geopolitics? Marco, what do you think?
The climate problem is geopolitics, is all of it. The climate solutions will come only from governmental decisions that should incentivize then industry and people's consumers' behavior. Just to relate the climate problem with the Arctic, not only in terms of consequences, but of causes. What is causing the problem, and which is even more critical to the Arctic, is the energy that we are consuming here, and especially the energy that the people, the growing population of Asia and Africa will be consuming over the next 20 years. This is where is the problem and the possible solution. If we don't switch, don't replace carbon generation, carbon power generation with the cleaner sources, we can do everything we can imagine in the West, but will not be sufficient. So to save the Arctic, to save the planet, or maybe the human beings in the planet, we need to work elsewhere than the Arctic. Then the Arctic, as we've seen, offers so many opportunities for new energies, wind, carbon capture, rare minerals that can be part of this solution. But the solution is political and stays somewhere else.
So you are basically saying that these two things that I try to put up against each other are two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
That's, we should have said that to the EU person yesterday, because that would sort of enlighten the discussion. No, anybody else from the panel who wants to pick up on this one? What does Equinor think about this way of thinking? I mean, you have a fairly aggressive kind of plan for developing the North, the Barents Sea, and you have lots of opposition in Norway from actually doing this. Can you say, do we have to choose between energy and geopolitics, or can we do both things at the same time?
I think we have to do both. Currently, the discussion is focused on the energy security, but we have to face our climate goals in parallel. So I think that's the starting point. We have to do that, and we have. There's not a lot of time, so we have to do it rapidly. And but also it's important to build communities, to get the ripple effects from the operations, that people are able to live in the Arctic, but also have good societies for it. The EU, also the ambassador pointed to that the 23rd of June, there was an agreement with the EU and Norway related to the statement of further strengthening the energy cooperation. And that is also where EU is supporting Norway related to the continued exploration and investments related to oil and gas to the European market. But it has to be sustainable. It has to be within the way that it should be included to the different perspectives, that everyone is heard in the dialogue. So it's important.
I want to bring in people from the audience. Are there any comments to this particular discussion we are having? So I think you have to come up in order to, that's what I was told by the organizers anyway. Thanks. Just state your name and...
I'm Julia. Can you hear me?
Yes. No, you have to. Let's do like this.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll be the mic.
Okay, so good afternoon. Thank you for your intervention. I'm Julia Secchi from the COE Master in Arctic Studies. I want to ask, well, given the fact that warming in the Arctic has a twofold implication, how will states that consider the Arctic route a strategic alternative, such as China, engage seriously in protection and sustainable management of Arctic environment if that possibility arises precisely from the melting of Arctic ice? Thank you.
And anybody wants to pick up on that issue?
I can.
Yeah.
Yes, I can try, and I will try also to link to the previous question which Peter you posed. I think the solution, I agree with my colleagues here, the solution has to take in consideration the climate and the energy, and so it has to be diversified and global. And what we see today is that probably we have to learn how we produce, how we transport energy in a time in which the energy demand will probably in the next decade, after probably this economic recession, explode. But that cannot be done without a sustainable and green transition. Probably we have not yet understood clearly what the implication of climate change will be to the world. And it's not only to save the planet, I would say the other way around, is to save human beings. The planet will find its way to solve that issue, but probably if we don't start now, we are going to face a big tsunami, which is much, much higher than any crisis that we have ever could think of, including economic and energy. But the two things have to go together, and we have to think already now about a green transition, not only to solve the crisis of today, but also to solve the future problems.
Does anybody want to pick up on the question specifically on the transport and the infrastructure side? I mean, the Northern Sea Route, for instance, is that a dead duck at the moment, as long as we have it seems like what was said, that it has all stopped, basically. All traffic has stopped. And therefore, is this something that will simply be come back again once things become normal, or do we have a more kind of permanent difficulty here? Is anybody willing to pick up on that one?
I can have a say on that in terms of, let's say, geopolitical risk. And provided I don't know when the NSR will be available in terms of winter routes, but in terms of geopolitical risk, it seems to be not a big improvement to, let's say, develop a route that is in the hands of one player. Mm-hmm. If you see the alternative routes, which are longer, you have some choke points, but then you have open seas. This doesn't seem to be an open sea. But
so the worst case is that the Russians and the Chinese just simply more control that route, and that's all there is to it.
I would say that the Russians will try to develop as much as possible this route, but it will be a Russian route rather than an international one.
Okay, we have one more.
Hi, Peter.
Yes.
I think that geopolitical interest, also Chinese geopolitical interest, is opposed to the sustainability in Arctic, because the Arctic pollution risk is too high. Because if we imagine a 24,000 container ship transit in Arctic, what it means for environment.
You mean in the case of an accident?
In case of accident, in terms of emissions.
Okay.
I told before about rhetoric. I think that Arctic routes are more geopolitical rhetoric and not respected the sustainability program.
Okay, thanks. Next question.
Thanks.
Introduce yourself. And
yeah. Good morning. I'm Luca Percalli, COE master, COE student, sorry. And you have just stressed the importance for governance by the public sector. And I was wondering, what about firms? And in particular, I was wondering whether Eni has already developed a comprehensive strategy towards the Arctic regions. That is a way to pursue a real development which is sustainable. That is something which can allow to exploit the great potential of the region and at the same time preserve the environment and the rights of indigenous people. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Eni is not very much exposed in the area. Just to give you a number, now we are producing around 2.5% of our oil and gas production in the Arctic, and we are present in Norway, where there is an environmental condition which is very much the same as everywhere in the offshore, because it's relatively mild weather, and so we are in the conditions of respecting the overall strategy of Eni in terms of environmental policies, which is not different from anywhere else. What is different in the Arctic is that you have some additional requirements. For example, the Goliath implant that was shown before by my colleague is by far the northernmost such a kind of implant that is fully powered by a cable coming from onshore, so there are no emissions in the operation of Goliath, because this was a requirement in the building of the plant. And for the future, as I was saying, we don't see an important development of conventional resources in the Arctic, because the future of conventional resources will be low cost, easy to produce. So most of our, let's say, energy will come not from the Arctic. Another different story is about new energies. This is a different chapter. It will be for the next decades. How much of rare minerals, how much of wind, of CCUS, of hydrogen. This is another story. But in terms of oil and gas, the strategy is that this will not be a key region.
Do you agree with that from Equinor's point of view? I mean, you are head of exactly, you are developing what Marco is saying is not of very much importance in the wider picture. What is your answer to Marco?
From an Equinor perspective, it's part of the Norwegian shelf, and we have some discoveries and some, for instance, Wisting that we would like to develop. But in short term and medium term, it's not that we see large new developments to be developed. It's more known resources that will be developed. And it's important when we develop new solutions that it's low with low carbon solutions and low emissions. From power from shore, for instance, that's a prerequisite for Wisting, and also that we create low carbon solutions from the gas streams onshore, for instance, hydrogen or ammonia that could be used to other industries, or as alluded to before, in order to have lower emissions in the industry as well.
I'm tempted to finish this discussion with one observation. Is it possible to say that in the short run, geopolitics plays a role in what we are doing because of the war, but in the long term, it will have a very small impact on, is there something of bridging these two perspectives by putting in the time perspective, namely that in the short term, Norway has to do whatever it can do to get out of the Arctic, and I don't know whether there is much to be done within the next 5 years, probably not very much, but whatever can be done, at least we have to take account of, and in the long term, it is really about sustainability. Is that a way to try to sum up this, or is that too simple? Are there any kind of, do you have a comment to that? I think we have to move on because we are running out of time. But if I can come back to you once we have sort of done one more thing with this panel, and that is we have now looked at the challenges. No, I also said that I wanted you to address very briefly what are the kind of solutions to what we are thinking about, and I wonder whether I should start with my Norwegian friend from Equinor. You don't really see this as a problem, do you? So you don't have a problem to solve, or what can you say something about that?
In terms of the resource situation in the Barents
area,
I think this is a huge challenge for us, and as I said, we have to have two thoughts in our head at the same time: energy security and also develop solutions that is with lower carbon emissions. And that is also a good start to bring you back to the context related to the agreement from the 23rd of June with the EU and Norway. That's a good starting point, because then we are in dialogue and we are collaborating on the measure. And it's also a support for us to go forward with the short-term actions on oil and gas, but at the same time also highlights for the future potential cooperation within offshore renewable energy, but also hydrogen and CCS. So that could also bring industrial solutions that is favorable for the future. But I think in Norway also we have, and in Equinor, we have a strong motivation and high public engagement related to these topics. For instance, Wisting, that's a public discussion. and that we acknowledge, and we need to take that debate and dialogue related to that. But the integrated management plan, that is also something that for the marine areas that applies for a science-based approach and wider stakeholder involvement related to how we should develop these areas. So the outcome of that's also important to have, that it's used and we are within those frames when we develop Wisting. For instance, preparedness, biodiversity, seabirds, whales. We are thinking of those kind of things when we develop Wisting related to seabirds and so on. So I think it's something about the interaction. We have to do is provide more energy and safe energy short term, but also develop long-term solution that is sustainable.
Okay. What kind of solutions? I mean, you have problems of market, you have problems of infrastructure, you have problems of people. Can you very briefly say a little bit about how do you want to solve them? You don't really need your slides, I think. You should, I think you should just try to say, you know, I mean, because you are an example of the future in many, I mean, here there is this a dynamic society in a kind of setting where you have the best wind resources in all of Europe on the coast of northern Norway. How can you realize this? What are your solutions to this?
The solution is we have to have money. We have to have risk capital.
Money always helps, yeah.
That's one. But of course we need a grid capacity. A lot of grid capacity. We see that Wisting is mentioned. Wisting, that's use of the grid capacity that we need to produce green hydrogen.
Yeah.
So that's a dilemma for us all. We have to do both, I think, but it's very important to have a capacity of grid that we can produce all the years, all time. He mentioned that Raugovidda is one of the best wind farm in Europe. It has a huge capacity, and the area is very good for producing wind and energy from wind. So yeah, the thing we need is grid capacity, and that's the biggest thing. But we also need to have area to produce electricity on. We have a wind farm with 200 megawatts today, and of course, it's in the future. Maybe it's the best to have a huge farm than have a lot of small farm around, and you can have a much greater capacity. So it's also the need of to have a good dialogue with the Samish people, the reindeer owner. It's very important to do that in a good way. You have to have dialogue with them, and you have to talk to them in the early phase of the project. It's very important.
So we're talking about a license to operate,
yeah,
from society as a whole,
yeah,
which is of course underlying all big projects these days, but especially here.
Yeah.
Tonje, you were in the last panel, and you said something very interesting about I know your organization is not a participant in the dialogue with Berlevåg, but I want to have your reflection a little bit on this kind of interaction, you know, because in traditional circles in Norway, people look at the Samis as a kind of putting difficulties in the development of the green shift and the new development. And you said a couple of very interesting things. You said that you wanted to sort of be in dialogue, in a constructive dialogue. Can you say a little bit more about what your view is of a project like this? Yeah, if you come here, that's, I know this is a little bit awkward, but and now we'll get it right.
So not to hijack your panel, but I guess you need some intersectional diversity here as well. First of all, we also need, the Sami people, the indigenous peoples also need the shift for a green transition, but we need it to be a just transition. And I guess like what the representatives from Berlevåg municipality is saying, that there needs to be a dialogue with the reindeer herders, the Sami right holders from the very beginning, is music to our ears. That is what we are always saying, that we need to be a part of the process from the beginning, and we want to be a part of the solution. Then, of course, I have also a cheating sheet here as well, because I don't know all the English words. But there also needs to be a common understanding that even though we come together in dialogue, the Sami people with municipalities or businesses or national government, it doesn't mean that we are saying yes. A dialogue does not mean our consent. So there needs to be common understanding that we want free, prior, and informed consent when coming into dialogue. So in that terms, I heard from the Berlevåg municipality that you actually have had a very good communications with the reindeer herders, and they have been allowed to pinpoint where the land use is the less damaging, and that's very positive. And I applaud that, and I hope that other municipalities follow suit. But I also think that it's important to have when looking at land encroachment, not just look at one project, because all land encroachment, all type of building affects the Sami reindeer herders' land use. So it's power lines, it's roads, it's cabins, everything. So we call for a more holistic view on land development. Yeah, I think I'm not gonna talk anymore.
That's perfect. That's a very useful precision. And Rolf, do you wanted to come back on what was just said?
Yes, because we have noticed the 2 last years that the climate change has given the reindeer owners big problems. In the summer, the reindeer is out the coast where we live and eat, and then they go to the inland. And the reindeer's owner has to feed the reindeer the 2 last years. And that's because you get ice on the ground, so the reindeer can't reach the food. And that's a result of the climate crisis. So the Sami people needs to go green, as we want to go green too.
Very interesting, and I'm sure our Italian friends now know a little bit more about reindeer herding in northern Norway, and that I'm sure you didn't know that. Let's just, Tom, do you have any sort of final idea about the kind of solutions for your particular part of the universe?
Yes, indeed. I mean, I'm not an expert in geopolitics, but what I can say from our point of view is that I think the green transition is one of the solutions. Probably it's not the only one. And the sooner this comes, the better, because at the same time, we are looking at technologies which is not only linked to 1 or 2 or 10 countries in the world, but this will be technology probably which is going to be available for the entire world. And at the same time, this will again probably save our planets. And as a space agency, we are committed to the Green Deal. We are committed to the goals that we want to have in Europe. But of course, Europe is only a small part of the world, so everyone really has to do that. And I can list a number of technologies that we would like to support, and we're going to do this in next coming years. And even things which are very innovative, like I was just writing down here the other day. We are looking, for example, technology to use space-based power systems. Of course, we are talking of something which could be available in the next 20 or 30 years. But this is technology that, if developed, will just definitely help to go through a new world, a new way of also feeding our economy.
Fine. And we are starting to approach the end, but we have 5 more minutes for discussion before we have the wrap-up. You wanted to ask a question, so no, if you have anything that you want to actually ask, now is the perfect time. So
Good afternoon. I'm Gabriele Olivieri, a CI master student. I have a question for Mr. Parinello. NASA Administrator Jim Brinstein believes that the extraction of rare earths metals from the surface of the moon will be possible this century. Can we say that the new industrial revolution, based more on rare earths and less on oil and gas, is linked to this possibility?
Well, that is a very good question, but the answer is very difficult. It depends really how much we can progress in this century. But we're even thinking of extracting, and there are even startups in the world thinking of extracting gold and rare earths and all these important metals, which are important for our technology. We should not forget that, even from asteroids. And they are really interesting projects. Probably today they look like, science fiction. But probably science fiction is what we have today 30 years ago. So I think probably at one point in time, this could be a technology, this could be a way also to gather these important elements, because we know that on Earth they are quite rare. That's why they're called rare minerals, rare earths. But we know there are a lot of, I would say, places outside there which probably could help. But it's very difficult really to know if this is going to be the future. But it could be one of it.
fine. I have one question from people who are listening in. China. We are talking about cooperation. We now have given a broad picture of what's happening, what's the dynamic, what's the time horizons, what are the difficulties, what are the solutions. We haven't talked much about the future, about cooperation between countries, okay? As long as this conflict goes on, Russia is not part of the Arctic family, and it will not be. How about China? That's basically the question. And I know it's a huge question, but it's absolutely well worth, and takes us back to geopolitics. Anybody in the panel who wants to say something about that?
Yes, Peter, if
yes,
you can.
Go on.
I think that geopolitically speaking, and also geoeconomically speaking, China is the same interest as Russia in Arctic shipping. Its primary objective is the security. And China looks for alternatives. The ever-given experience has been devastating for global supply chain. And Russia is, geopolitically speaking, is a strategic partner of China. We can't forget the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And it's a strategic partner also in energy field. So I think that China would demonstrate to the world that the plan, the naval policy, wants to play an increasing role as a maritime power. China have already colonized almost the South Asian ports through the purse string strategy since 2006. And it now, I think that China aims to complete the encirclement of Eurasia. Because a multidimensional imperial strategy that makes us to understand how China has a huge interest in the development of Arctic trades. Okay. So I come back to geopolitical rhetoric when we talk about Arctic routes.
Thanks. That's clear. Thanks. You want to say something, Marco?
Yeah, from a energy perspective, I would say that China is very careful in trying not to rely on any single supplier. So at least in terms of energy, on the one side, we see that over the last few months, after the war has started, China has been multiplying the supplies of gas from Russia, taking advantage of the situation of less gas going to Europe. And this will be going on for the next years. For example, in terms of LNG, they were from 6 to 10% of supplies. In terms of gas pipelines, they are building these new pipelines or building up on this capacity. But I wouldn't call Russia a strategic partner, energy partner of China. I don't know about the rest, or I would not comment on the rest, but in terms of energy, the Chinese are very much concerned about not depending on any supplier, including Russia. And they will, let's say, sort of limit these volumes coming from Russia. Now, they are very opportunistic. They have a chance. They are taking the role, they're replacing the role at lower prices, not only for gas, but also for oil, but will not be, let's say, the model that we have been seeing for 60 years between Russia and Europe. Not at all.
But do you think that they will play an active energy part in the Arctic? China?
Well, the first interest of China is to accelerate, if they manage, the energy transition, because for them is also a way to be energy independent. They are very much relying on foreign supplies. They are very much worried about this also for the routes, Malacca, for the role of the Middle Eastern resources. So they are trying to, let's say, reduce the dependence on oil and gas, not only because they believe in this transformation, they truly believe in this, but because it's in their national interest to rely on domestic resources. Since they control much of the value chain, of the batteries, of the solar partners, they see it as an opportunity. So in general terms, they will, let's say, play all the games, including conventional and new energy in the Arctic. But in my view, the Arctic, as it was said 1 minute ago, it is for them an alternative route in case the other routes, being them the biggest commercial power, in case the other routes are problematic. They need to build alternatives. I don't see this alternative available over the next decade, but they are very forward-looking. So they are thinking about 2050 to 2080. This is the kind of approach of the Chinese leadership.
Thank you very much. That's a very interesting sort of end to the discussion so far. I want to challenge you one last thing. We have 5 minutes left exactly. Can you give me 2 takeaways each from this discussion? Just short, just 1 sentence, 2 sentences. Tom.
Okay, okay. I give 2 really very short ones. I think we have to be very bold. We have to be ambitious. We have to talk to everyone. We have to talk to the scientific community, but I really take seriously what the lady before said. I think we have to speak a lot to the citizens because they have to be part of the equation. They have to be part of the solution, and probably we need to improve our communication with them. This is my first takeaway. My second one is a personal one, is that I think the asteroid is already on Earth. We don't need to be hit by an asteroid, but it's already there. And I think the world challenge is this needs to be solved by world partnership and collaboration.
But the important thing that NASA found out is that you can push an asteroid out of course.
Absolutely. But
so there is hope for us.
There's hope for us, and I can add to this that next year we're going to launch a satellite and we try to see what are the consequences of that impact.
Okay, fine. Mark.
In terms of energy and also international politics, I fear and I think we already have a kind of 2 Arctics, and we are risking to having a sort of difference, a deepening and a widening. Since we know that environmental benchmarks, the standards that, for example, our companies, international companies, are key to preserve the Arctic and the planet in general, we need to, let's say, leave the door open for cooperation, for including the rest of the Arctic world. For example, in terms of carbon sinking, one of the most important regions to compensate the emissions is the subarctic tundra and green area, which is, most of it is in Russia and in Canada. If we don't leave the opportunity for international dialogue to work on this, we risk also losing this other part, which is key in the energy transition. So let's leave an opportunity to the dialogue, international legal cooperation.
Yes, I think if leaving two takeaways, I think the first one is that we will only get this done together. It's dependent on collaboration, and I think this dialogue and discussions has brought forward that we see the same picture. Things are going too slow related to low carbon solutions and the reductions of emissions. And the second one is that we have to think value change. Barents or the Arctic is not the short-term solutions on Europe's energy crisis, but it's part of the long term as well. We have to think long term also for the energy security, but it has to be based on low carbon solutions with low emissions, but also ammonia, hydrogen could be part of the picture long term.
Rolf, do you want to?
I agree with Knut Vidar on the first one. We have to do this together. And the second one, we have to do it quickly.
Yes, I will follow up that. Of course, we have to do it very quick. We have to stop talking. We have to start doing. We have to go to start to focus much more on the sustainability. We have to have clean fuel. We have to have boats and cars and ships to go on clean fuel in the future. And we have to do it now. Can't wait more. We have to save the planet.
And Berlevåg is?
We are going to help.
Not single-handedly.
Not single-handedly. We're going to help, yes, of course. And we're going to focusing on the sustainability. We're going to produce some food also from the heat.
Paolo, you have the last word.
Yes, my key word is risk. It's a geopolitical risk due to the present for Russian-Ukrainian conflict. Risk for the humanity, sustainability risk, focused on shipping, and South Europe and Mediterranean risk, because the development of Arctic routes, we have to remember that is a risk for Mediterranean ports.
Thanks. That concludes this panel, and Mr. Mellomvik who wants to say something, but before he does that, can I thank everybody, and on behalf of, I'm sure, the audience as well, let's, thanks, closer. Let us give them a hand, okay? Thank you.
And please have your seats. Thank you very much, all of you. This has been a fantastic kind of dialogue, but not only this dialogue. Some of you have just been here for this dialogue, but we had 4 dialogues, and I am impressed by all the ideas, perspectives, but also what was said about the risks. But what I said yesterday is that what we are doing these 2 days is some kind of a think tank. We are trying to put perspectives together, and hopefully we could see new ways of going from that. So my wish is now that we go from think tank to go tank, and that means that we should try to do things maybe, as you say, fast, maybe also very important, even though fast, with a lot of reflections. And I think we have a lot to build on. So thank you all to all the panels. Thank you to the audience, not only the audience in the hall, but those who have been following us digitally all these days. And thank you to the Norwegian Embassy. We will never forget what we experienced yesterday. Some of you were not there, but it was wonderful. You should come back next year. We have a very generous embassy and ambassador of Norway here to Italy. So that was very great. But you know that you have prepared, people have been trying, the student especially, they have prepared very many good questions. So you have been working, and I like that. But there are some who have been working more. So I will ask Christina from SHOI, the General Director, and I will ask Alessandra from SHOI and Bård from the High North to come forward to the stage. And of course, you deserve whatever we could give you. But as I told the ambassador yesterday, in Norway we have very strict rules about gifts. They should be taxed and all of that. So we can't give you so much. But let us give them a big hand, all these three who have been working with this for a year. And then to you, Christina, we have some. My friend here, he is really good in a lot of things, also in music. So you will have it in music. So, Bård.
No, my name is Hogne.
Yes, Hogne. Yes, Hogne.
Yes. Bård is over there. Yes, since this is a Norwegian-Italian cooperation, I thought a very good gift would be to give you some Norwegian music. So I went to a bookstore downtown, which had a very good music section. So this is Norway's second biggest musical success ever. It's a band called Røyksopp. If you have the chance, see them live. They're touring around right now. Yes, and this is an album called Lost Tapes. So this is a gift from us in Norway, Norwegian music, Røyksopp. Thank you very much for your hard work.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you.
Kind. Thank you so much.
And then, Bård, we will go to Alessandra.
Yes, and we were talking yesterday, she's actually trying to learn Norwegian. So, yes, and so we're going to continue giving Norwegian gifts. This is a-ha, which is Norway's biggest musical export ever. And what's special about this album is it's recorded live in a studio on a Norwegian island outside of Ålesund. It was released a couple of years ago, and it's called a-ha MTV Unplugged Summer Solstice. So, Alessandra, here you go.
Thank you. Is it in Norwegian? Thank you. I can say tusen takk, det var veldig bra. Thank you very much, really, and I appreciate. And we continue our conversation in Italian and in Norwegian. Thank you. Thank you, Frodo.
Thank you very much. And then our own Bård. And what have you found to him, Hogne?
Well, I was recommended that well, first of all, since they got Norwegian gifts, you're going to get Italian gifts. Yes. So I was recommended this Italian chocolate, which is supposed to be very, very good. It's very, very dark. In 3 different flavors, and the percentage of cocoa is, the amount of cocoa is different. So you go from 99% to 70%. So, yeah. And then we have a bottle here, Castel Greve, which is a Chianti Classico. So I hope you don't do as Hannibal the Cannibal did, eat it with flavor beans and a liver. But here you go, a good bottle of wine.
Thank you very much all. Thank you very much all. And then we will meet here next year about the same time. But maybe we could meet in Bodø at the High North Dialogue already in April. And I know many of you will try to come. SHOI are planning a side event, north seen from the south. But now, first of all, you must have a very safe trip back home. Seeing you soon again. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
But it's so small. But this Röyksopp is special. They are special. You do that. Okay, thank you. Very interesting perspectives from the space, from the sky up there.
Io purtroppo ieri ho perduto tutto però immagino che ci sarà un modo di seguirlo.
And thank you very much.
Differita, diciamo.
Thank you. Thank you very much.